Hello, everybody, and welcome to Comically Incompetent. My name is Doug. This is the podcast where each week we take a movie, we take a beer, and talk about it. This week we are wrapping up our Indiana Jones quadrilogy with a very iffy movie, but my special guest this week is my guest for the whole series. Dad, how you doing?
Good. And in typical Hollywood fashion here, we are. This is the next week's episode, but yet we're filming it 10 minutes after the other episode.
Yeah, well, we're getting ahead of the thing, which is funny because this is supposed to come out the last Monday of February. We are still in January.
Okay.
But that's movie magic. You never know unless you looked at our shirts.
That's right.
But very harsh on the beer this week. This movie is obviously, if you've watched the other three, you know, not our favorite. So we got a beer this week called Sucks by Lagunitas, which I just realized the first beer you and I ever did on a show together was Ant-Man. We did a Lagunitas beer.
That's right.
So bringing that full circle so far.
That's a great brewery too. Are they San Diego brewery?
I have the information up, just not on this page right now. I got my iPad with the movie notes, but we'll get into more of that at the end of the show. But getting into this movie, I want to talk about first. I remember, I think you showed me the first three. I was a big fan growing up, and you and I were so excited. I remember waiting outside of the Regal Theater where we lived, long line of people. Everyone's really excited to go and see this movie. We all sit down, and I think only half the theater was still there when the movie actually ended.
Yes.
It was...
Yes.
And it's funny because...
Well, it had a lot to live up to. So,
yes.
One of these days I'll watch this movie under the premise of trying to wipe my brain clear of the first three and see what I really think.
Well, I tried to do it. So, I watched this movie this morning with my girlfriend. She did not grow up with these movies. I showed her the first three while in quarantine. She'd never seen them before. And she just thought this one was funny. She didn't like it. She thought it was bad, but she's like, it's funny.
Yes.
And she's like, why aren't you laughing at this stuff? It's ridiculous. I was like, because I'm more hurt by this than anything else.
So I watched it again. I've seen it when it came out in the theater with you. And then I've seen it maybe one other time, and then I watched it again the other day for preparation for this show. And this time when I watched it, I just tried to wipe out how bad it is and watched it for what it was. And I think a couple of things. First off, in this movie, they're going after this whole story about a crystal skull, okay? The first movie went after the Ark of the Covenant. Yes. The third movie went after the Holy Grail. Those were things that are mythical, but people believe in them. There's
historical writings on
references to them and things like that, right? The Crystal Skull was just something no one ever knew of. If it wasn't for this movie, there is no Crystal Skull story that you would have ever heard in your life. So the first thing that made that difficult is they were going after something that really wasn't of interest. Didn't have, right? I mean, the whole premise of the Indiana Jones movies is historical fiction, right? Yeah. It's making a movie about like it's something real when in fact it's really not, but you kind of leave that question, that reasonable doubt.
Yeah, well,
there's no reasonable doubt. There's no such thing as a crystal skull.
Yeah. But it's funny because the second one did the same kind of thing as this, but they did it better. There was something about the second one that had a charm. This one lacked any sense of charm.
Yeah, at least the second one was these sort of mythical rocks or something.
Yeah.
But you're right. This one kind of went off on that tangent. But at least the second one was just didn't pretend to be part of the Indiana Jones saga. It was Indiana Jones, but just this offshoot movie.
Yeah.
This one tried to pull in, right? So, when they start the first scene, it's they introduce in a young character. Mutt is his name.
Well, that's not the first scene.
Well, but he's early in the movie.
Yeah, you have Shia LaBeouf playing Mutt.
Shia LaBeouf playing Mutt, who turns out to be, spoiler alert, who turns out to be Indiana Jones' son that he had with that. Marion Ravenwood's son from Indiana Jones, Raiders of the Lost Ark, and then she comes clean that it was actually Indy's son.
Yeah,
he was the father, and he never knew that.
Yeah, which, I mean, they were trying to build a franchise after Harrison Ford.
Yeah,
and it completely failed.
They were trying to go to 5. They introduced this concept of space aliens, which I'm still choking on a bit, but okay. But then they went down the crystal skull thing, which just there was a quest for something nobody had any interest in, right? You kind of had an interest in the Ark of the Covenant.
Yeah.
You had an interest in
the Holy Grail.
The Holy Grail.
Yeah.
You even had a bit of an interest in the rocks that they were going in Temple of Doom because he brought them back to the village and they had powers for that village in India. I mean, they sort of sold it as something that, could quasi be real in some weird shape or form. In this case, it went too far over the line.
Yeah, I mean, even when, this movie, weirdly enough, though, started off okay.
It
wasn't great.
I thought we got a good one here.
Yeah, because it starts off, right, they're being captured by the Russians, and Indy's there, and they need to go find this thing that you don't know what it is, but it's magnetic, and you're kind of like, okay.
All right, yeah, this has got something to it. They went back to, this was set, 20 years after, or 18 years after the first two movies. So the Nazi thing was gone at that point.
Yeah, this
is now you're in the Cold War, so you're 1950-ish, and you've got the Russians as the bad guys. All right, I get it, although I didn't necessarily buy Cate Blanchett as the bad guy.
Which, I love her as an actress. She just, I don't know if it was the script, something didn't work with her, which is a bummer because, I mean, Lord of the Rings, everyone who watches this show or heard the show knows I love Lord of the Rings. Outstanding actress, phenomenal as Lady Galadriel in the Lord of the Rings.
Just a bad role.
Yeah, I mean, her accent was fine. She's a good actress. She did the best with what she could, but it was just so horribly written.
Like they say, writing.
Yeah. Well, it's funny because when the movie came out, Shia LaBeouf, they were doing all their press releases for this movie, and Shia LaBeouf basically talked shit about the movie. And he was saying that, but he did it in a way that he wasn't like, this isn't Spielberg's fault, this isn't the writer's fault. He's like, he blamed it on himself, saying it should have, it was kind of a backhanded thing. He's like, I should be able to take bad writing and make it good as an actor, and I couldn't do it. And so they fired him off any future movies, because they said, even though he's going to be the face of the franchise.
So they were trying to make him Indiana Jones go forward, right?
And he ruined it.
And that ended. Plus, the character that they set him up as, I get it, he was supposed to be, the long lost son of Indiana Jones, but he had this he was trying to play this Fonzie kind of character. He kept
the greaser
look, and it just wasn't. It wasn't. You weren't buying in. You weren't buying into Cate Blanchett as a Russian spy or Russian villain, and you weren't buying into Shia LaBeouf as the greaser. Attitude kid. I mean,
even John Hurt. You don't buy into John Hurt's character at all. He just plays the crazy guy for 99% of his part of the movie.
Right.
And again, John Hurt, phenomenal actor.
Oh yeah, I mean he's an Academy Award-winning actor, right?
And he couldn't do anything with this movie.
Yeah. So it was Indiana Jones.
There were Indiana Jones elements throughout the movie, pieces of Indy,
but they almost tried too hard.
I think a big example of that is the nuke scene in the very beginning.
Yeah.
They tried way too hard for that scene.
So like you said, it started out and I'm thinking, this has got opportunity here, right? We had some good chases. We had, well, I will tell you something else too. Because this movie was made much later.
2008.
2008. So it was made 15 plus years after let's see, 87 was
19?
Last Crusade. 87 was Last Crusade.
89 was Last Crusade.
89 was Last Crusade, and this was what year?
08. So almost 20 years later?
Yeah. So, long story short.
Wait, yeah, 89 to 99. 99 to 09.
We're doing math. We're doing math on the camera.
19. You can see why I do podcasts and not math.
19 years later, you could tell they used a lot more CGI in this movie.
Yeah.
CGI was not their friend in this movie.
Because
it was either the CGI wasn't ready yet, it was bad, or you just bought into the non-CGI stunts they did in the original Indiana Jones movies. To switch to CGI so much, it just didn't cut it.
That's the thing, is these movies, the first three, they used CGI when they had to, but everything else was practical. And practical is something that a lot of people hold on to. And when three movies are practical and all of a sudden they're not, I think a good example of it is Star Wars. The first three Star Wars, the original Star Wars, were all practical and a CGI here and there, obviously. But the costumes were practical, and then they moved in and tried to do some CGI, and people did not like it. And same with this. These movies were practical, or in the first three. People liked that. It gave a sense of realism. It gave you something to hold on to and to latch on to in the story to make you feel like you're a part of it and that it could be real. When you start CGIing in skulls and aliens and stuff, that's just you lost what people liked about it. You lost what made Indiana Jones at its core.
Right. And then the other thing too is, the scenery and stuff. In the first couple of movies, they went to, historic Venice, Italy, and places like that. In this movie, they were just in some mythical South American jungle somewhere.
Incan ruins.
Yeah, it just didn't play into as believable and as buy-in. But it started out, like I said, interesting, started taking an interesting twist, and then we have the scene where Indiana Jones survives a nuclear bomb
inside a refrigerator.
He's on an army base. It looks like where they were testing nuclear bombs at the time, and they had the typical, like you've heard before, the town that's built. They built a fake town.
Yeah.
They played it up a little too much, but they built a fake town. He gets stuck in the town, and the nuclear test is going off, and he jumps into an old refrigerator that's lined with lead, and that's how he survives the nuclear explosion.
They try to explain it away in one split-second shot of saying that the refrigerator is lined with lead.
Right.
Let's say that worked. Let's say he survives the blast inside the fridge. But then you see the fridge, like, barreling around and flying around. It's like, and then he gets out. Not even a scratch or bruise.
Yes. The door doesn't open, nothing.
He's completely fine. Then all of a sudden, he lands and he just knocks the door open and rolls out, and it's just a little dizzy.
And at that point, the believability takes a spiral out of control.
Yes. So then he goes and they're like questioning him. They're like, "Are you a KGB spy?" And he's like, "I'm Indiana Jones." Of course not. And then, okay, so now we go to school, and the actor who played Marcus Brody in real life had passed away by this point. So they had Jim Broadbent play his kind of like character.
Yeah, you go back to university, and there's a new headmaster at the university.
So now Indy's fired because of all his ties to what just happened, even though that doesn't make any sense for
they're
situation
trying to line him up to be some communist supporter of some sort, and so he loses his job at the university. And I don't know what the relevance of that was, because even if he still worked at the university, that would not have stopped him from going on the adventure he was going to go on anyway. Yes.
So it served no relevance to the story.
And now supposedly he's after helping some colleague of his that he went to grad school with years ago, who we've never heard of before.
Never mentioned in any part of history in this series at all. Yeah.
So
Oxley, Harold Oxley.
Harold Oxley, another inconsistency in this movie of inconsistencies. Yet they keep trying to throw in these little things. There's a scene when they're when the early on, before the nuclear explosion, they take him into this giant warehouse.
Yep.
And you knew what they were going to do. They were going to go after they were going to show the Ark of the Covenant, because remember they stored it in that giant warehouse after Raiders of the Lost Ark. They go in to find this box that's got something in it. They don't know what it is. It turns out to be an alien that they had captured.
Yeah, which then you learn that this warehouse from the first movie is actually a warehouse in Area 51 in Roswell, New Mexico, which I think the thing that made the end of the first one interesting was that the mystery of what is this warehouse, and they're like, oh, it's in Area 51. You're like, oh, well, that kind of ruined the mystery of that whole bit.
And then somehow he ends up with the Russians at Area 51 and nobody else around, because they're going to do this nuclear test. But long story short, when he's in the warehouse, he finds the Russians are trying to get this alien, and I'm not exactly sure why. It had something to do with
this crystal skull came out of the head of the alien. That alien.
Okay.
Supposedly, because then you see the alien later, and she opens up the cut in its head, and that is empty.
Yeah, that's how bad a job they did, because I still don't understand that whole...
Even I'm explaining it, it still doesn't make any sense.
But within that, as he's escaping out of this warehouse, he bumps into a crate that sort of the wood slides off, and it's the Ark of the Covenant.
Yeah.
So they keep going back to little things from the other movies. But
even when you're in his house, there's a picture of Willie Scott on the background. There's a picture of one of the rocks or something. There's a drawing of the Holy Grail. There's stuff to remind you. It's almost like they're like, we know this isn't very good, but look, here's fun things you enjoyed from the other movies, right? It's fun still. And it's a hard movie to watch, because every turn you're like, there's something either inconsistent or poorly written or a dialogue that's unbelievable.
Yeah, it just wasn't. Again, going after the Crystal Skull. Why? Why would he be so interested in doing that? He was going after artifacts that were, all of a sudden he's going after aliens. I mean, it just didn't make any sense. The chase scenes and things like that they tried to bring in were not. There was nothing that you were wowed over. There was, the CGI was iffy at best.
I mean, the best chase scene at first was what we have as our background, driving through the forest, and then it gets ruined by Shia LaBeouf swinging from the trees with the monkeys.
Yes.
Which I think was when...
The villains, there was nothing about the villains that was unique or interesting.
Kate Blanchett was the villain. She was just a Russian soldier.
Yeah, and there was a bad guy who we don't really know who he was. He didn't have really any persona like bad guys in the other movies, and he just he was just kind of there. I mean, Indiana Jones probably fought him 3 or 4 times, and there's just no reason why.
Yeah, I mean, and that was I think one of the big problems with the fight scenes was the thing because he was the big brute that we talked about. Every Indy movie has that big brute that he has to fight, but Indy didn't get away by using his smarts in this. He just fought a dude a couple times, and then it kind of nobody really won, and then they move on. And then
there was this guy, I don't know, he was an Australian guy that was like supposedly a guy that Indiana Jones knew.
Ray Winston's character.
Mac went on adventures with him. Well, then he turns out to be working for the Russians. But then he says he was a double agent. But then he goes back working for the Russians. You're just like, what?
He was an agent. Then he was a double agent. Then he was a triple agent. Then it turns out none of that was true, and he was just working for the Russians the whole time. And going back and forth. I mean,
there seemed to be no. The vehicle he played was just like when Indiana Jones was about to win, he blocked him from winning.
Yeah, it was just basically to make it not so easy on Indy to keep moving forward. But then. The only purpose that he served was just halting the story, because then you're finally like, okay, here we go, we're getting going, and then he just stop it, and you're like,
yeah,
all right, keep going, I guess. And then, I mean, it's hard to even go through this movie, because a lot of it's just, I mean, it's hard to even talk about. I remember just watching this morning, my girlfriend, we stopped halfway through, and she goes, I don't get what's happening.
Right.
And I tried to explain it, and even then, I'm midway through explaining, I'm like, I don't even think I'm explaining this right. Like,
and then you got this supposed crystal skull, which... It just seemed like a giant piece of plastic.
Yeah, they wanted it. The Russians wanted it because she said that if they could figure out its power, then they could see all over the world, control everyone's mind. Which I don't know how she got. She got there from the skull that she can control the whole world.
Yeah, and it had somehow it would like glow and light up, and because it had some sort of powers to it, and supposedly it turned. Who was the doctor that was
Oxley?
Oxley turned him crazy or something.
It turned him into a vessel that the skull was able to speak through, I guess. But so basically, his whole story was weird too. He goes and finds the skull in that like Incan cemetery, and then he takes the skull all the way to the end point that we see, but then realizes he can't get into the thing, so he takes it all the way back to the Incan thing, puts it back. It drove him crazy, and then he goes all the way back, and gets captured by the Russians. And then sends Indy all the way back to the Incan thing. And then sends them all the way back to the pillar again.
Yeah. And then every time they would show up somewhere within this Inca, ruins or something, they'd run into some weird bush people of some sort that there was no relevance to why were these people here?
Like, why I understand the second, like the final city, why their people would live there, but why in that cemetery? Are they guarding it?
I don't know.
But then there's like 2 of them that guard it, and then he kills one of them.
Right.
And the other one just runs away when he pulls out the gun.
Yeah. I mean, there was one sort of interesting scene when he and Mutt are running from some of these, bush people of some sort, and they're about to hit him with a blow dart, and Indy jumps up and blows on the other end of the blow dart, and it goes back into the guy's throat, and you're like, okay, that was cool.
But then it also made me think, do they poison both sides of the dart?
Right. I did the same thing. Yeah. I'm like, well, okay, was it both sides poisoned?
Like, why would they poison both sides? It doesn't make... Like, you think they would have thought of that. Like, what if he accidentally inhaled it or something?
So, yeah, there was a lot of irrelevant things. Like you said, the chase scene through the whole jungle, and then all of a sudden Shia LaBeouf gets stuck on a vine, and then the monkeys somehow follow him, and then, they're in cars racing through the jungle. Shia LaBeouf gets caught on the vine. They're racing through the jungle. Time passes, and then somehow they come passing by him again. Shouldn't they be long gone at that point?
Yeah, because he only swings a few yards, and they kept driving, but all of a sudden he's in front of them somehow.
And now he's like Ace Ventura or something, because now the monkeys are following him,
and they attack the Russians. Yeah.
It's like, what the hell was? Why are we doing this?
No,
why are we doing this?
None of it makes any sense.
Oh, and then the ants or whatever those bugs are.
That to me was the best part of this movie, because that was the only thing that made me. Well,
that was the creepy crawl. That was the snakes, the rat, whatever, the ants. But then again, the dumb skull thing, they would
stops the ants. And then they capture that guy. The ants kill that big oafish dude that we don't know anything about. Kill him, but then he was never a good villain, so you don't feel anything about it. You're kind of like, okay, he's gone. And then all the ants go away. Like, they stop attacking because they have that dude, so apparently the ants are done.
Right.
And then they land in the water, and then that's when Oxy's like, we will fall 3 times, and they
because they're in the amphibious car.
Yeah.
They're in the water, and then they go over 3 gigantic waterfalls that no one would ever survive.
Completely fine on all 3.
Yeah, and they're completely fine.
And then they go in, they get in the temple, it's this whole thing, and then there's aliens and a spaceship, and...
Yeah, and then, first getting in the temple, so they just show up to this rock... And somehow they figure out that this rock is really more than just a rock. And now they're following what Oxley had been dreaming in his cell.
Well, he figured out in his cell that if you take out those things, the sand will come out. Which I don't know how he figured that out.
Will lower the rock.
Which then they say, well, I think one of the big problems I have with this movie is that when you move from place to place in the other 3 movies, they say, here's why we're going to go here. And then you get the big plane shot. Whereas in this one, they're like, Oxley figured it out, but you don't know what he figured out, and then they're just in the next place.
And they go into this Mayan tomb now, and then they run into this storage of artifacts from
every era
of history, and you're like, well, how did those get there, and why is that relevant to anything?
Yeah. Like even ancient Egyptians, like, but how did they go to Egypt and get it and bring it back?
And Indiana Jones has to then go through the maze of stuff that he goes through, but not up to par with other Indiana Jones mazes that he's had to go through.
No, I mean, even when they're in the Incan graveyard, that was the most indie we get, because he's like solving these riddles and he goes up, but even then it's dumbed down. It's the part where Shia LaBeouf's like, it's a dead end, Gramps. And he goes, stands to the other side and just tilts the other way.
And the Shia LaBeouf character just kept making it worse, because he kept like Gramps and
get on Grant, like
and it's like a Jimmy Cagney movie.
Yeah, it was just bad. And then all right, they go in, they find the thing. That's when they bring the skull in, and Cate Blanchett's character puts it on the last head of the last alien.
They go in, and now they find these crystal aliens on these thrones. Yeah, these giant crystal aliens, and one of them's missing the skull, which is obviously the one they had all found.
Which they never explained.
Well, somehow they were bringing it back. They were bringing it back for a reason.
But how they get it from this all-powerful entity, how they take its head off all those years ago.
Yeah, I don't know.
And then they're all just waiting.
Yeah.
It's like, okay.
So they just sat there and waited till someone brought the skull back? Why?
Yeah. And then they put the skull back on the spaceship that it's actually a spaceship.
They put the skull back on, and then the thing turns on them.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
Which it always does, and they kept that at least. The selfish, she was greedy, she wanted all the knowledge, so she puts it on, it turns on her, and gives her all the knowledge, which ends up killing her. But then it turns out to be a full metal iron spaceship that you see in the background, which then starts to suck them, which then he's like, it's a portal to another dimension. Which the space within spaces.
Well, they kept saying, they go, oh, it's going to the other world or something. No, it's a portal to a alternate dimension. It's like, what?
It doesn't make any sense at all. And then they escape.
The rocks now turn into some spaceship.
Yeah. Well, no, the spaceship was there, just covered by the rocks.
Yeah.
Which, I don't know
why.
It doesn't make sense. So then I remember a lot of people already left the theater, but I remember the line that killed it for everyone was when, after the spaceship leaves, it's all gone, and Indy goes, the treasure was knowledge. It's like, no.
No.
Every other movie had treasure. we want treasure. We don't want to know that the treasure was knowledge. An audience wants the Ark of the Covenant. They want the cup of, like, the eternal life. Like, we want something tangible, like, for them to hold on to.
And, of course, all the good guys escape.
And all
the bad guys die.
Yep.
And then the everything crumbles. The spaceship flies away. The water flows in and covers it. And basically the idea is it's like it never existed. They covered up, the aliens covered up everything they left behind. They covered up their footprint.
Yeah, he says like a broom to the footprints or something like that. Yeah.
Covered up the footprint. That's the end of it. And you're like, why did I just watch that movie?
Yeah, and then Karen Allen's married everyone Indy get married.
We didn't talk about that. They introduced her back into this movie.
Yes, they did bring her back in, which actually, interesting enough, I don't know if you read this part. Her and Spielberg in real life had a lot of fights on the first movie because he wrote the character, or whoever him and his team wrote the character of Mary Raven to be like this just basic damsel in distress love interest, and she was like, no, if I'm going to be in this, she's going to be strong, she's going to be a fighter, she's going to...
Yep.
And they seemed to kind of hit a middle ground, which then her character was what she wanted to be, was in the movie. So she butted heads with them a lot. So I was surprised that they brought her back in for this one. But she didn't serve as much of a purpose. She was kind of like... Basically, she's like, I'm mad at you, Indy. Then he flashes his Harrison Ford charm, and she's like, okay, all's forgiven. And then...
Yeah, I mean, she was kind of there because this was her son.
Yeah.
And then she and Indy fall back in love, and it was like, if you could take the worst part of movie 1, 2, and 3 and just make an entire movie out of it, that's what they did.
Yeah, and then they get married in the end, and then you have that scene where it's like, the doors fly open because of the wind, and the hat goes to Shia LaBeouf's feet, and he goes to put on, you're thinking maybe he's the next Indy, then Harrison Ford takes it, and like, a little funny moment, and they walk out, and that's the end of the movie.
Yeah.
Now,
look, it was a must-see because 1, 2, and 3 were so great. You had to see 4. It just put a damper on it. But the real question is, do they leave it at that? Are we done with Indiana Jones?
Yeah, that's what I want to get into. So we're kind of wrapping this up on the movie a little early because it's so bad.
We talked probably too much about 4.
This movie sucks.
It did.
Right?
It did.
It sucks. So what I want to do now is talk about, I want to know where you think, what this movie could have done differently to be better, and where you think this series could go for a 5th.
Well, that's a good question. I mean, I would definitely love to see a new Indiana Jones movie, but I think they would have to, and understanding that Harrison Ford is probably, aged out of this role, but they have to somehow write a script that continues the Indiana Jones story.
Yeah.
But let's get rid of the space aliens. Let's have an adventure that goes after something tangible and historical and somewhat, and build upon the characters of that they had, the kind of character building that they had in 1 and 3 for sure, and or maybe we just bury it and it's done. That's it for the Indiana Jones crusade, and we're done.
Yeah. I think what this movie could have done to have been something better would have been... I think the Russians were fine if at the time period. I think you take out the crystal. You give them something... There's so many ancient artifacts they could have gone to find this, and they chose aliens for some reason. And yeah, I think if they're going to do another one, it has to be something like... Even if they just make something up.
Well, maybe you do something where Indiana Jones is a retired professor.
Yeah.
And... he has a student who becomes his protege, and he somehow guides him, and almost Indiana Jones sort of becomes the Brody type character where he's now got his protege, and then they can redo the classics. But like I said, Indiana Jones and the Crystal Skull here suffered from CGI.
Yeah.
I mean, it didn't give that rustic type of feel to it with the CGI. Maybe it was because they were going after aliens and unbelievable things they were searching for, but I would buy into some sort of Indiana Jones movie where he has his protege that he is helping to guide through through a maze of finding some sort of historical artifact of interest, and go from there.
Yeah, I mean, it has to be, I think, something of an artifact that is pseudo-real, whether something in some religion.
I mean, if you think about it, what was that movie with your favorite actor, Nicolas Cage, where he went and had to go find the Constitution or something. What was
National
that movie?
Treasure.
National Treasure.
I hate
right?
Nicolas Cage.
Okay, Nicolas Cage, I get it. With the exception of Moonstruck, you struggle with pretty much every
No exceptions. No exceptions.
And as your grandfather, my dad would say, the worst part of Moonstruck was Nicolas Cage. But anyways,
I would agree.
Long story short, at least it was like, oh, I get it. They're going after something, right? They're going after an actual artifact, and as made up as it was, it had like this interesting kind of, I bought in, right?
Well, they can stick with religion. I mean, maybe leave Christianity and go for like a Hindu or a Buddhist something, a Muslim something. I mean, even an artifact of some kind that was written about in text and people know about.
I mean, if you think about it, it's like the Da Vinci Code books, right? And then Tom Hanks played those characters, right? I mean, that was all, that was very Indiana Jones-ish.
It was.
The difference is it was an Indiana Jones story. There wasn't just an Indiana Jones character.
Yeah.
It was a regular guy, right? But we can build on some sort of Indiana Jones protege that goes after some sort of interesting artifact in the light of the Da Vinci Code type stuff or something of that nature, and just have a lot of fun, or really go interesting and maybe you do sort of the Star Wars thing. You do the prequel.
Young Indy or something?
Like maybe we go back to, how things got to where they got. I mean, how did the Holy Grail get to that place it was, right?
I think you were on track to something of, I think you keep Harrison Ford. I think that, because I think they want to recast, and they want to make a new series of Indiana Jones movies for someone else. I think the thing that they're losing is people didn't like Indiana Jones because of how great the writing was. They liked Indiana Jones because Harrison Ford brought something to that character that people could love.
It was a combination of the writing in the movie, the music. But let's not forget the music John Williams did was, it's still in your head, dun, 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 right?
But I'm saying the character of Indy was not great because of how they wrote the character of Indiana Jones. The character of Indy specifically was great because Harrison Ford brought something to it.
He fit the part.
And I think that you can't do it without. I think to do it without him it'd be like if they tried to do Ferris Bueller's sequel with somebody else. Matthew Broderick is Ferris Bueller. You can't rewrite. There's some characters that you can do again, and characters you can recast, and things that we've seen. We live in a day and age of a million different remakes. But I think that there are certain characters in certain movies that are so iconic that you can't do with somebody else.
So what you're saying is there isn't a 5. We can never do it again.
I think there's a 5. I think you hit on the nail on the head. I think Harrison Ford is older, obviously. I think what you do is you have someone go on an adventure, someone younger, maybe one of his students, sneaks into his car and tags along on some adventure he goes on. They get stuck in this wild goose chase for this artifact, and that's the movie. That's the 5th one. But then I think you have to end it. There can't be Indy, the reboot with Chris Evans as Indiana Jones. I don't think that's possible, and if it is, I don't think it will be good.
Let's ask that question. If you were to recast a new Indiana Jones character, and it's not Shia LaBeouf,
no.
Okay, but whoever the protege is that becomes the Indiana Jones character, who is it in the actors of today?
I mean, you have so many great actors that fit. I think Harrison Ford was a little
Is there somebody that stands out as the obvious choice?
Well, I think Harrison Ford was a little bit older when he did the first one, when he did Indiana Jones. He wasn't old, he was probably like 30s, 40s-ish. For the first one. No, 30s probably, right?
I'm assuming so. I mean, I think I think he's an actor that got started later in his career.
Yeah, so I think you have to go, if you want to match that, you can't go with someone too young or it doesn't work. Because Indy was an established professor, an established archaeologist when we first meet him. So you can't go with someone young. You have to go with someone who kind of would fit that bill. So I think we're going to go with someone who's a little bit older. I mean, I think there's a lot of actors that could do it. I think someone who's been great in these reboots, I think who George Lucas really likes because he was in Star Wars, like a Donald Glover, who did the younger version of Lando Calrissian when they did the Han Solo movie. I think he's fantastic, great actor. I don't think he'd want to do it, but I think he'd be great. I mean, I think there's a bunch of actors. I don't want to see anyone from the MCU. I don't want to see the same actors over and over again that we keep seeing in everything.
Uh-huh. Has there been any chatter out there about a potential for 5?
There's been rumor. I think I read Chris Pratt which I don't like because honestly, he kind of ruined the Jurassic Park series when they did Jurassic World with him in it.
Yeah, but that was like Jurassic 9 by the time he got into it.
No, it was 4.
Okay, 4, so...
But this is Indy 5.
I mean, I watched Jurassic Park 1 and didn't realize there were others till much
2
later
is
on.
very good. 3 is not very good.
Yeah, I didn't...
2 is all Jeff Goldblum. That's why it's amazing. Yeah, I don't want to see an event. I don't want to see Chris Pratt. I don't want to see an Avenger. I don't want to see these same people we see in every big budget movie. I think the actor with the most talent out of those, of the MCU movies that they could do, would have been Chadwick Boseman. But obviously, he passed away. And Chris Evans. Because they've done movies outside of the MCU that are phenomenal, and they've nailed it. I mean, did you see Knives Out?
Yes.
Chris Evans killed it in that role.
Yep.
But, I mean, I want to see maybe someone new, maybe someone younger, or even like a John David Washington, Denzel Washington's son.
Uh-huh.
He's been I mean, did you see BlacKkKlansman?
I did.
Dude's phenomenal. I think he would be really good if you brought him in. Or you have someone who's like, I mean, that guy, I don't think he did a great job in that movie specifically, but the guy who played young Han Solo in Star Wars.
Mm-hmm.
I think he's a great actor. I think he just got in a bad movie.
Well, that would be interesting to have young Han Solo
and young
play
exactly.
Indiana Jones.
But, I mean, is there anyone you can think of that you think would be good in that kind of role?
I'm trying
to pull
I don't know.
IMDb.
I mean, I think you're probably looking at maybe a no-name at this point to come in and establish himself.
That's what I'm thinking.
You know, I mean, if you think about it, Harrison Ford wasn't a household name at that point. I mean, he had done Star Wars, but... Right?
Yeah. Or, like maybe like a Pedro Pascal. He's been really famous lately. He's in The Mandalorian, this guy.
Uh-huh.
He might be good. He's big. He got a lot of fame to his name. He could be great. I mean, there's a lot of people I think who could do a great job. I just think, I think you're running out of time here to really get something really good in there. And I think, like I said, I don't want to see an Avenger. I think it has to be because Harrison Ford was not... I mean, Star Wars had just come out. Star Wars made him a household name, and he was just kind of coming off that fame. I think that's
so
why
what you're saying is
good.
Paul Rudd can't be the new Indiana Jones.
I think that actually wouldn't be that bad when you put him in that role. It actually wouldn't be horrible. I mean, he's in shape because of Ant-Man, so he can do all the stunts. He's funny, so he can bring that kind of character. I think people find him really charismatic, which is funny because people did not find him that way when he back in the beginning of his career doing like 40-Year-Old Virgin stuff.
Right.
I don't think I think Ant-Man helped me. I think that actually wouldn't be that bad of an idea if you put Paul Rudd in
So should we start a campaign? We'll start a campaign.
Paul Rudd is Indiana.
Paul Rudd is the next Indiana Jones. Is that?
I would be on board.
We'll start
for
a
that.
petition. We'll see how many signatures we can get.
Yeah, I can see that. I mean,
Paul Rudd, if you're listening, we'd like to see
not.
you as the next Indiana Jones.
Trust me, he's not. But I think that wouldn't be bad.
Are you saying he didn't listen to my Ant-Man show?
No, I'm sure he did.
Okay.
I'm sure he did.
Thank you.
I think this is going to be kind of a hot take on this. I think you take out Spielberg as the director. I think you get him as a producer, you don't have him direct.
Well, okay.
That's what I think.
Okay.
The last movie I saw that he did was Ready Player One, which was an adaptation of one of my favorite books of all time, and it was very bad.
So, and he directed that?
He directed it.
Okay.
And it was a CGI
Not that he has to
mess.
prove himself in any way, shape, or form
No, God,
anymore.
no. I mean, in my top 3 favorite movies, Jurassic Park is right at the top. I mean, it's one of my favorite movies of all time. He has nothing to prove. I just don't think that I think that we should get someone younger, someone newer, someone who's got a little less writing on their name, and give him, because I think they'll have more to prove, and they'll do something different. Because obviously the direction that Spielberg was going was not where we wanted to go. So you get someone there with fresh eyes on the series, someone who grew up with these, someone younger, grew up with the Indiana Jones movies, who can take what they want to see and what we want to see as a generation and make a good Indiana Jones movie out of it.
We'll have to see.
Because I think that's
I think we're past the opportunity, and Indiana Jones is a story for others. Yeah. Your kids someday will watch it and go, that was really cool.
I mean, I want to show them. I mean, this was a fantastic movie. I mean, these are some of my favorites. These first 3.
Yeah, we just won't tell them about 4.
4 will not exist. I mean, I have a disc of all 4 of them. I don't think I've ever flipped to the page with a disc of the 4th movie. But I mean, they tried something. It didn't work. You can't blame them for that. Harrison Ford was on board for it. It's not like he was forced into it for the money. I think he loves playing Indiana Jones.
Well, you got to give the fans what they want, and people wanted to see another Indiana Jones movie. They tried it, and
didn't work.
It didn't work.
You can't fault them for trying, but like I said, I think 5 could be good. I think if you get some fresh blood in there, somebody new, somebody young who grew up with the trilogy, the original ones, and let them loose, let them do something fun with it. I think that's where this should go in the end. But yeah, I think that wraps up our Indiana Jones quadrilogy. How do you feel about that?
I'm just amazed that we were able to talk for 40 minutes about Indiana Jones and the Crystal Skull.
To be fair, we talked about 20 minutes of the Crystal Skull and 20 minutes on anything else. But I think I'm going to move on to the beer now, if you're cool with that.
Okay.
So this is a Lagunitas beer. So Lagunitas Brewing, we've had on the show before.
They're not in San Diego. They're from Petaluma, California.
They have 3 locations in tap rooms: Petaluma, Chicago, and Seattle. Which
Petaluma's in Northern California.
Yes, we've been into Petaluma before.
We've been into Petaluma. There's a great barbecue joint called Lombardi's Barbecue. No relation to us, but it was really good.
Really, I mean this is one of the breweries that I feel like it reminds me a lot of like a Firestone Walker. It's the top of the beers you can get at like a grocery store.
Are they still a boutique brewery, or has Lagunitas been bought by one of the big guys now?
I think they've probably been bought by one of the big guys by now. I mean, you'd think. Maybe not.
Just because their distribution is, I mean, you kind of get them everywhere now.
Yeah.
So.
I mean, they can go anywhere. I mean, they're fantastic. Like I said, it's one of the top you can get like a grocery store, which is very rare. Because a lot of grocery beers, like, I still enjoy these beers, but it's like Coors Light, Bud Light. Like,
aren't they famous for a specific, what was their famous, didn't they have a specific something that they...
Yeah, they had a couple that were pretty big, but I think
their basic...
It was
the Lagunitas IPA.
It was their basic IPA that got them...
They were the first ones that kind of got that word IPA out there, right?
Yeah,
or the initials IPA out there.
Yeah, which they brought... IPAs are pretty... people either love IPA because of the bitterness, they hate an IPA because of bitterness.
Yeah.
What I think Lagunitas did is bring that kind of bitter IPA into a lot more homes, bring it into a lot more people to enjoy something like this. Oh God, sorry. But yeah, I mean, this beer is called Sucks. It is a dry hopped IPA. It says a joyously dry hopped IPA at the times. I'm using Sucks because the movie that we talked about today sucks, but this is a COVID related beer. Joyously dry hopped IPA of the times.
Why is it COVID related beer?
Because it's a limited release that they did right now.
Oh, so it's a limited release and it's really just only during COVID.
Experiencing severe year-end WTF-ness allow us to recommend this simple palate cleanser on a journey to a wiser 2021. Hop forward and bright with forward-looking hope that next year will be brighter than the last. It can only be... Right? Yeah, it can only be... Life is uncertain, don't sip.
And if you're in Michigan, you get 10 cents back for every bottle you
well, there you go. But yes, this is a 2020 brand beer saying 2020 sucks. And 2020 did suck. I will agree on that, but right now we're using it to say that Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull sucks. But this beer was fantastic. I mean, I bought a 6-pack from the grocery store and drank 2 of them before we actually even started recording this. So they're pretty good. I'd say check them out. I mean, you can get the beer almost anywhere. You can get their basic, their simple IPA anywhere. And what we used on your first ever show, the Ant-Man show, Little Something.
Little Something.
You can get that anywhere. Something. They've kind of expanded into a few kind of more craft beer feel with like their Hazy Wonder and Super Cluster and a few other beers like that. This is a limited release. This sucks. If you want to try it, I'd say go try and find it now. It is limited release. They also have a hazy version of Little Something.
Like to try that.
We should try that at some point. And a few beers that they release and then are probably never coming back again. Apparently, one-hitters, they're calling them. So, yeah, I mean, Lagunitas is super famous. I don't think they need our plug at all. Not that any of these breweries that I've had on the show do need our plug. But, I mean, I highly recommend them.
Well, I would recommend if you watch Indiana Jones and the Crystal Skull, you might want to pick up a 6-pack and drink it all before you watch
It might
Indiana
be more
Jones
enjoyable.
And the Crystal Skull. It'll be more enjoyable.
I would have to agree on that. But I think that wraps up our 4 movies of Indiana Jones series.
It was a lot of fun.
Yeah, thanks for being here for all 4 movies. I appreciate
Absolutely. that. Absolutely. I got to dress up for the first 2, which was a lot of fun,
Very
like
good.
Indiana Jones. And had a lot of fun on the show, and look forward to hearing more from Comically Incompetent.
Thank you. So, I don't know what's coming next. Like I said, we're recording these way in advance. This is the end of February, and we're recording it in January. So I don't know what is coming next as far as this podcast goes, but we'll keep you guys updated. So follow the Twitter and the Instagram to get updates on what's coming next after the Indiana Jones series is done. That's a lot of talking. And we're on YouTube and everywhere you listen to podcasts. So check us out. New episodes every Monday morning at 7 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. So yeah, one more time, thanks for being here.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right, we'll see you guys next month in March. Bye.